Welcome to Small Arms Solutions. Today we're looking at part 6 of our crime series, and we are featuring the Lorcin L9MM pistol. I would have to say of pretty much everything that we've discussed so far, nothing stands out in my mind more than Lorcin, and that is just due to the fact that we had seen so many of them come through. They were just completely dangerous guns. These were guns that would come apart very easily. These are guns that would the slides would break. They would come in with broken triggers. It'd be, in a lot of cases, very difficult to even remove the magazines. You would have grip safeties that would malfunction. These guns were a complete safety hazard. The Lorcin pistols were also a zinc alloy frame slide barrel. Now, as you can see, we have a barrel sleeve, and then we had a material over that barrel sleeve. And as you can see how this is broken away. Again, showing the quality, you would have these parts that would just break away. Now, is it still safe to fire the gun? Yes, it would still maintain the integrity, but you would just have this material, this pot metal that would break right away. Now, you have a heavy pistol. You have that because this is a blowback pistol. You would have to have that additional weight on there to keep that slide closed long enough where you would have your pressure drop so you could safely extract and eject. You would have a very heavy recoil spring as well. You did have a grip safety on here, similar to that of a 1911. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. You did have a safety that was a safe and fire engaged. It was very similar to that of the Breko, Jennings, and the Lorcins. Now, the company was owned by a gentleman named Jim Waldorf. Now, he was a friend of Peter Jennings, Jennings Firearms, and you can see a lot of similarities in their designs of these pistols as well. Now, of course, these were manufactured in California. These are part of the ATF's Ring of Fire. Part of all those guns that were utilized in crime, and that's basically what they were designed for. This also followed the same path. It was designed for low-income type people who could exercise their Second Amendment rights. The problem is the reliability of them was not there to make them a gun that you could depend on. But like Lorcin, like Jennings, like Breko, like many of those companies, they were more interested in manufacturing large numbers of low-quality pistols than they were any kind of quality. Lorcin went bankrupt in 1998 due to 18 pending product liability and personal injury and wrongful death suits, which is also a testament to their quality. They had so many lawsuits that the company was unable to keep its doors open. And they finally filed for bankruptcy in 1996. In 1997, the company emerged from bankruptcy, but finally closed in 1999 due to 22 additional lawsuits. So, again, this pistol is a zinc alloy type frame. We'll take a look at how this thing comes apart, and so you can take a look at the inside of it as well. So, with the safety disengaged, pull back, make sure it's clear. You're going to pull the trigger. For disassembly, we have a locking bar on the rear here. We have to push inward on that, pull the slide back, lift up. You want to make sure you have your finger over the hole in the rear of the slide so it doesn't go flying out, and disassemble. Pull the rear out. We have our recoil spring and our firing pin, slide and frame, recoil spring. Now, first off, major problem in forensics was the firing pin. This often would come in and it was broken. It also utilized it not only as a firing pin, but also as an ejector, which is also very unsafe due to the fact that it has the firing pin as an ejector. If the pistol was to be dropped and the slide was to come jar and it was to come rearward, there's a very good chance that you could set the cartridge off. Not only would you set the cartridge off, but it would also be out of battery when it would fire, which is relatively dangerous as far as the safety of the gun. Striker spring, again, pot metal. You're going to see a photograph where the side was broken off of one of the pistols. This was not uncommon. We had these guns where we had them in test fire with regular normal ammunition, and these things would break just due to that quality, just due to that really poor quality. Zinc frames. You have a lot of small parts in here that would often, when people would reassemble these guns, they would not have it done properly, and the guns wouldn't work. We have a cross bolt in here that has the connector on here. This would often be pushed through, and it wouldn't be, so the gun wouldn't be functional. And part of forensics is when we test it, we have to talk about how the condition of the pistol is as we received it. So if it was disassembled not properly and reassembled not properly, and it didn't work, we have to report the gun was not functional as received due to the fact that it was improperly assembled. So whether the gun functioned as intended or not, or functioned as manufactured, was not the case. It was how it came to us as it was found by the police officer. Again, we have a barrel that's pinned to the frame. It's a direct blowback. So the barrels on here, complete garbage. We're going to be going to the range here, and we're going to show you the high quality of this pistol. Due to the quality of this pistol and being nervous about it, we only fired about 20 rounds. I do want to thank Brandon from the gun room for being able to obtain this masterpiece of crime guns for us. The only malfunction was the last shot. The last shot, we had a failure to eject on every round. So the last one would not eject. Now comes the target. The rifling was so bad in this pistol that, as you can see from the target, the bullets hit sideways. They keyholed. The bullets would not stabilize. So, for as far as accuracy, forget it. The bullets are going to hit sideways. That is just the poor quality of the rifling, the shallow rifling, the barrel being oversized. There's a lot of things that can cause that. That ammunition was Black Hills, 115 grain full metal jacket. No reason why there should have been any issues. But a lot of these barrels that are not made properly, they're too shallow. There are a lot of gases escaping behind them. It doesn't grip it to stabilize it. That affects your accuracy majorly. Another thing is serial numbers on these. You see our serial numbers are right here. They're into this zinc alloy. This was another pistol that was extremely common to have delivered with serial numbers removed. They would be ground off in many different ways. And again, we always had a lot of success with these because fortunately the people who were defacing them didn't really know how to do it properly. So we were able to, most of the time, to restore these. And now what good does that do? That was always a question too, is, sometimes you can get a lot of good forensic leads. For instance, we can tell you who the initial point of purchase was, but that's all that it tells you. It tells you the first guy that bought it. It doesn't talk about whether it was sold at a gun show or whether it was stolen. It doesn't really give you any additional information that's going to help you with your case other than that first person that it was that bought it. And a lot of these guns were bought by criminals, or they were bought by somebody who would go in from a gang. They kept his record clean so he could buy them, or they would get somebody and pay them good money to go in there and straw purchase guns for them as well. So we've seen quite a bit of that for as far as tracking them. This is another part of the forensics aspect that there's a lot of good work that can be done. A lot of good work was done, but in the end, what did it accomplish? We've talked in these previous videos about the digital database, the 9MM, the DrugFire IBIS systems, where we have a digital database of the cartridge case, and it would have an open case file. So you would have images of cartridge cases from all different crime scenes. And the computer would go through and take the one that you entered, and it would correlate and give you what it thought was the closest ones, and you would visually look at them. So you'd be able to look at one, say that's a match, and then you call it back from the evidence. You would verify on the scope that it was in fact a match. So now we've linked those crimes. So we could have one of these guns that we could link to several crimes. Per se, we could, I had one that we had it was a Glock 23 pistol that was linked to several, probably 3 or 4 homicides, multiple assaults, and some other shooting incidents. So there was probably well over 7 or 8, 9 hits of crimes that it was used. It was taken during a DWI stop. I found underneath the guy's seat. The DA could not put that gun in his hands for any of those crimes. So we know the history of that gun, but without being able to put that in the hand of somebody, for as good as that information is, it was pretty much useless. So that was one of the things that that we had done with catching these bullets like this, for instance. When you have bullets that are keyhole and you have very poor engraving on them, they're relatively difficult to match. They have good class characteristics, but you have to have individual characteristics for you to be able to say, yes, that was fired. This bullet was fired in that gun. So most laboratories did not waste time with open case files of projectiles. Even though these digital databases did take projectiles, the hit rate was so low and it was so time consuming to put them in, there was no way to justify putting those systems in there. And a regular crime laboratory would not keep evidence, especially from automatic pistols. They may keep an open case file of revolvers, but they would not for automatic pistols because of that time. Say we had a reason to believe that it was used in a specific crime, we'd be able to call that evidence back from the police department to do a microscope comparison, but to just do a blanket hit, it was totally not worth the time to do it. We had some different models available from Lorcin at the time when they were still being manufactured. You had the L22, which is a 22 long rifle caliber, 9+1, and like anything else in 22, the pistols were garbage. They very rarely would ever work, and the Lorcin was no exception to that. L25, which is their 25 automatic caliber pistol, 7+1, certainly a little bit better than the 22, but still the reliability was just not there. The feeding process, the entire way the slides were made, it was not what you would call a reliable firearm, to say the least. And the L9mm, which is one that we see here, which is probably the most common, these could work and they couldn't work. And for as far as how long they would work, that was the other question, was how long would they actually work for? But right out of the box, for the most part, you were very lucky to have one that was functional. L32, you had a 32 automatic caliber pistol, which was 7+1, and you had the L380, which is a 3 automatic caliber pistol, which they offered a full range of calibers. Now, they all had basically the same features. You had a mag release on the side, and in the case of this one here, this is very difficult to manipulate the magazine release. It was very hard to push it in, and then to try to get it to push it out, it's very difficult to be able to operate. Well, we're going to reassemble this here. So you got to make sure that you put the firing pin in properly. So we'll drop it in the frame. You're going to drop in your striker spring. You're going to drop in your lock plate. You have to be sure that your recoil spring is engaged in the proper location. So you have a hole that we have to insert the locking piece into. And then we push it on the locking plate to allow it to go in place. We put our magazine in, pull back. The trigger on these is absolutely horrid. Very, very heavy. As we see as the slide comes back, you're able to see the protrusion of the firing pin. The extractor holds the rim in place, so it locks it up against the breech. If this was to come back very, very violently, it could set that cartridge off, and as you can see, the cartridge would not be supported. In fact, you'd be able to see the bulged cartridge case and a cracked cartridge case, so you could tell when this fired out of battery. But due to the fact that this thing did utilize the firing pin as a ejector, this was dangerous. And also the fact was, if this was to be dropped and that sear was to release, it could also fire from being dropped. The mechanism was literally not safe, and that's with or without the grip safety. The grip safety, that takes care of the manual pull of the trigger, but if the connector was to fail to release the striker, relatively dangerous. Now, I imagine even to this day, I've been out of forensics since 2008 or so, 2009, that time period is when I left. We saw these in Milwaukee and we saw them in New York. These were just regular guns that we saw. And most of the time they come back stolen, or they were straw purchases. We certainly understand the ability to allow anybody of any income bracket to exercise their Second Amendment rights. There's absolutely no question. But when we look at the ethics of a company, you're providing something to somebody for self-defense for legitimate purposes that the gun doesn't work. So what kind of a justification is that you're providing a service to somebody? You're providing guns that you relatively know exactly who the clientele is going to be. It's going to be criminals who are going to use these once and they're going to drop them and then they're going to disappear. These are not guns that are going to be kept. These are cheap guns that are used. They're used in a crime. They're usually discarded. So there is that argument of all these to bring up fire guns. He goes, if you're going to be utilizing these for self-defense, how can you put out a gun that doesn't work? Especially when you have the amount of liabilities and you have all these liability cases against a company for accidental discharges, people getting killed because the guns are dropped. We're not talking criminals either. I mean, your local drug dealer is not going to go after Lorcin because he dropped his gun when he was doing a drug deal and that went off and shot him in the ass. He's not going to be suing them. These are going to be legitimate people who utilize these guns and then they have problems at a range or at home. The guns drop or whatnot. You're offering a liability to people. You're not offering them security. But we respect their ability to do their job, their ability to manufacture guns, and people's choice to buy those. But from a criminalistic standpoint, Lorcin was certainly the epitome of guns that we saw coming in. Them, along with the Jennings, the Bricos, the High Points. I would even say that Lorcin I saw more than I did even High Points. High Point, if you were to look at most of the Ring of Fire guns, was probably the best built. Where you legitimately could have a lower income person purchase one and it would go off and it would be good for self-defense. They certainly probably were the higher end of the low end, if you want to say that was the higher end of the low. But these guns, the Lorcins, the Jennings, and the Bricos specifically, these were guns that were known not to work. They were known to be dangerous to the person who used them, let alone the person who they were going to be using them against. So we do hope you enjoyed this video. If you do, please click like, please subscribe, and even better, share. Thank you. This perhaps represents the crap of crap. I don't know how else to say it. This is a gun that we had seen. What? I don't know. What? Oh my God. This pistol will be. My eyes now. Assembly, you push inward on this locking lever, pull back. This could be difficult. Here, and we're going to show you the high quality of this pistol.
Did you really just say the high quality
Yes.
of this pistol?
Yes, I did.